Good morning, good afternoon, rather, and members of my Declassified channel. Thank you so much for joining. And today we're going to be looking at another controversial topic, Jamaica Eye and the surveillance state. How much is too much? And this is a very important topic in light of what we're seeing coming out of Jamaica. Jamaica Eye, for those of you who do not know, is a camera system, a CCTV, in which people will be monitored. And the government is suggesting this is a sort of strategy to reduce the levels of crime and violence on the island. The Jamaica Eye is being promoted as an important tool in the fight against crime and violence, but as surveillance technology expands, an important question must be asked. How much surveillance is too much? In this episode of Declassified, we must examine the growing role of cameras, digital technology, artificial intelligence, facial recognition, data collection, and government surveillance. Can Jamaica improve public safety without sacrificing privacy and civil liberties? Who controls the information collected? Who has access to it? How long is the data stored? And perhaps most importantly, who watches the watchers? A surveillance system may be created by one government for one purpose, but what happens when governments change and the technology remains? Is Jamaica Eye simply a crime-fighting tool, or are we gradually building the infrastructure of a surveillance state? Join the discussion. And this is a very important discussion for us to be having in light of surveillance that is going around the world. Now, the Gleaner is reporting in a story carried, I think, 4 days ago about the fact that Jamaica actually invested over $700 million, that's 790 million in new Jamaica Eye contracts with major build out for Portmore. So the government has approved close to 790 million Jamaican dollars in new contracts for the expansion and maintenance of its Jamaica Eye surveillance network, with the bulk of the spending directed at Portmore St. Catherine, according to contract award notices obtained by the Financial Gleaner. The awards come as Jamaica grapples with balancing the public's interest in safety against citizens' right to move freely without being tracked by the state. The larger of the two contracts, valued at around $439.4 million, was awarded on July 21st to local firm that is SiteWatch Electronic Security Limited through restricted bidding for the supply and installation of 300 CCTV cameras and associated devices and infrastructure for Jamaica Eye in Portmore. A second contract worth $351.1 million was awarded 3 days later to local firm Conex Services Limited on a restricted basis for maintenance and related services for the Jamaica Eye system island-wide. So what is happening here is that we have to be careful of this huge sums of money being invested into a project, and sometimes in Jamaica we have a problem with maintenance. We invest in these highways, we invest in these infrastructure, and we find that they're not properly maintained. So we have to hold the government accountable. But how much is too much in terms of how they are going to be violating our rights in terms of our privacy? Are we going to be private citizens, or are we going to give up our rights in the name of protecting ourselves and reducing crime and violence? That is what we need to ask ourselves. Now, there's a letter of the editor, Jamaica Eye is expanding. Is its oversight keeping up? Now, Jamaica is making another substantial investment in its national surveillance network. The government has approved around $790 million in Jamaica Eye contracts, including $439.4 million for 300 CCTV cameras and related infrastructure in Portmore. Another $305.1 million contract will fund maintenance and associated services island-wide. For a country grappling with serious crime and violence challenges, the value of expanded surveillance coverage is evident. Camera footage can assist investigations, reconstruct incidents, and provide evidence that might otherwise be unavailable. However, as Jamaica Eye expands, its governance must remain the same attention, must receive rather the same attention as its technology. The program has grown significantly since its launch as the island network, combining government-operated cameras with feeds voluntarily provided by private camera owners. The government has also announced a 3-year expansion that will add another 2,500 cameras. Now, we're seeing cameras everywhere, and obviously they will be watching us. It's almost like we're seeing 1984 play out of 1984, the book that was written by George Orwell. We have to be careful. We have to watch because our rights could be violated. And these are things that we must be on guard about. And I know sometimes we tend to, put safety over privacy, safety over our rights in terms of to privacy and to be secure in our own spaces, right? Now, this is the promise of fighting crime and violence. Jamaica faces serious crime, and we know that, and cameras can potentially help police investigate crimes, identify subjects, find missing persons, and respond to emergencies. So from that perspective, it's good, but we've got to still be careful in terms of how that might violate some of our rights. The bigger question, however, who is watching? As surveillance expands, the state potentially gains the ability to monitor people's movements through public spaces on an unprecedented scale. So even our cars, everything that we're doing can be watched. And we've got to be careful because some of these technologies are quite intrusive. Now, from cameras to a surveillance network, the discussion should go beyond simply asking whether there are cameras. The real issue is what happens when cameras are combined with facial recognition, which we have in China or they have in China, artificial intelligence, which we know is going around the world and is becoming the norm, databases, telecommunications data, vehicle tracking, digital identification systems. So all of these things we have to be mindful of and be vigilant about. Now, what happens when governments change? A government may introduce surveillance with good intentions, but surveillance powers do not disappear when that government leaves office. So the system remains and future governments inherit it and they can use it against you. And what when that government, the successive governments, the one that comes after this government, what if they should elevate the agenda in terms of suggesting that we become fully a surveillance state and all aspects of our lives will be watched and will be exposed to the eyes of the government? Now, who watches the watchers? This could be one of, the strongest questions that we need to pose to the government. What independent oversight exists? And who can access the information? How long is it stored? And can citizens challenge misuse? What happens if surveillance data is abused for political, personal, or commercial purposes? And these are things that we have to ask the government. Now, the editor of the Gleaner, wrote something quite interesting this morning in the Jamaica Gleaner, and the title of that piece was Jamaica Eye Regulation. Now, can they regulate Jamaica Eye? This newspaper, it's suggesting, has long supported the deployment of closed-circuit cameras in public spaces as tools to help fight and deter crime. When a crime takes place and the incident is recorded, that video can provide crucial evidence to bring the perpetrators to justice. Similarly, if criminals know there is a good chance that their actions might be caught in film, they may be deterred from committing crimes. Given Jamaica's high crime levels, this has particular resonance. The Gleaner's editorial board, therefore, welcomes the recent report that more than 300 new public-facing cameras will be added to the government's Jamaica Eye network, and that it has entered into a separate contract to maintain existing ones. However, even as the board supports these initiatives, recent rapid advances in digital technology, coupled with increasing evidence of its abuse in other jurisdictions that infringe on citizens' rights to privacy and free association, underscore the need for a robust and transparent regulatory regime for Jamaica Eye. If such a framework exists, the public appears to know little about it. Who has access to Jamaica Eye's data and under what circumstances? So they're asking here some very important questions, even though we know that these media houses are very hypocritical because they are fully on board with an open, well, an obscure surveillance state, as it were. At the same time, Parliament should consider reviewing the broad rather, authority granted to the Minister of National Security to exempt citizens from data privacy protections under the Data Protection Act on the grounds of safeguarding national security. Perhaps this power should be vested in a judge in chambers acting on the minister's ex parte application and supported by credible evidence. This issue received little public scrutiny before the DPA's passage in 2020. So the Jamaica Gleaner is also exposing and is trying to ask, to probe, as it were, what is going to happen to citizens' rights and who is going to be managing and holding the watchers to account. We have to ask these questions because they're watching us. But who are watching, as I've been asking, the watchers? And how will they violate all of our civil rights? Now, we understand that crime does not always come from the bottom up. Most of the times, it generates from the top down. So the fact of the matter is that the government and the private sector also engage a lot of times in criminal activities. So who is really watching them? So we, the citizens, are the ones that they are suspicious of. At the same time, the citizens are also suspicious of the government. And these are the things that we must ask ourselves. It is a fact, it is an irrefutable fact that government is often engaged or supports, even if they're not directly involved in criminal activities, but they a lot of times prepare or lay the foundation, the ecosystem in which crime and violence thrive. So we, the citizens, have to also ask the government, are you setting cameras for yourselves? Can we see what you are doing? Because they're seeing what we're doing, but can we, the citizens, because when they set themselves on high and pretend to be the ones who are innocent and saintly, then they're going to see us as the ones who are the demons, and that we should be punished, we should be castigated. So how do we even reconcile this whole Jamaica Eye? Another thing that I'm always skeptical about in Jamaica is that nothing that we ever suggest as strategies for crime and violence, apart from just this brutal way of having the police go and kill people, at random, I don't know if many of these strategies, recommendations have ever worked. It's just that we are in a society in which we're just following what we see abroad, yet still it might not be applicable to our culture. And to suggest that we're not going to have any social intervention, also economic intervention, because the fact of the matter, the way in which we are running the Jamaican economy, is not tenable. Is not tenable. We've got to find creative ways in terms of growing our economy. It can't be coming from abroad because all of these policies coming from the IMF are actually destroying the foundation of our economy if it has already not been destroyed. Okay, so we have to look at these things. What about education? What about bridging the gap between the rich and the poor? What about the gun trafficking laws that we need to implement from having all of these arms coming from the United States into Jamaica, and nothing is being done to curb that traffic? We have to do these things. What about the trafficking of human beings, of children? We trying to bridge these gaps? Are we trying to reduce that? Because we are just thinking that crime and violence is linked to somebody who, goes into Kingston or wherever they go into and just shoot someone, and that is crime and violence. Okay? But oftentimes we do not see behind the scenes the persons, the authors, the intellectual authors of the murder. Oftentimes the person who commit the crime that we see, and or anger is directed toward that person. But we often do not understand in the Caribbean and in Jamaica, to be specific, the root cause. The premier people, the people who are the supporters and the organizers of the murders, those who plan it, those who manage it. And I think that crime and violence in Jamaica is managed. It is not a situation in which they want a cure, because it is profitable for the elites. It is profitable for the government. It is profitable for our financiers, because they reap hundreds, if not billions of dollars from the proceeds of crime. Okay, so we have to look carefully at what we desire. To suggest that having a Jamaica Eye is going to solve the problem that we see in Jamaica without any productivity. At least China, which we talk about, is a surveillance state, but at least they have created the foundation, and their society is productive. So their economy is not bad in comparison to that of Jamaica and the Caribbean. So they can surveil their state, and that's their culture, to be frank. It's not the culture of Jamaicans to be controlled and to be watched and to be surveilled. But at the same time, we're not creating the economic conditions for our people to be prosperous and for them to thrive in that country. And if not, then the crime and violence will not be reduced, because people are going to look for illegal and illicit means of being able of survival. And that is what is continues rather. It continues to increase the levels of crime that we see in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean. Because if they can't find jobs, then they're going to go into the drug trade, and that is an illegal. They're going to go into the arms trafficking trade. They're going to go into the human trafficking. They're going to go into drugs, everything, narcotics, because that is what it's all about. I'm not suggesting that they should, but if the government is not providing the jobs for them, and stop telling me about unemployment rate, because that is just nonsense, right? It's on paper, it's just theory, has nothing to do with the practical realities of Jamaica. We know that the unemployment rate is way higher than they are purporting. Okay, so we have to look carefully at this Jamaica Eye and see where it is going, because very soon, if we're not careful, everything that we do is going to be surveilled, which could mean also, especially in light of what is happening in our world now, people's identities can be confused, merged, and the government could say that you committed a crime when you did not, because we oftentimes don't have the technologies that we think we have. And even those who are sophisticated, who have these sophisticated technologies and are more experienced, sometimes they do make errors in terms of, you know, mixing up, merging people's identities. And what if you're called and it's not you? But according to their cameras, and with the merger, also the fusion of AI, anything can happen. And they can create identities, mistaken identities, and call you in and criminalize your record when you perhaps are not a criminal. So these are things we have to look at very carefully because AI and all of these things are dangerous. We're looking at TikTok videos and we're seeing many things that are happening there, and some real videos cannot be even distinguished between the real and the false, the real and the fake. Right? So these cameras are, we cannot just rely on them and think that they are going to give us 100% accurate information, the information that we want to be able to reduce crime. But crime and violence cannot just be reduced by having some CCTV. No, it's not going to work like that. Some cameras all around Jamaica. That is not going to really do it. And we know how Jamaicans are particularly, skillful and cunning, and there are ways that they can use to destroy them. I'm not sure if they're going to be conspicuous in terms of being able to be seen. Perhaps they are going to be hidden. But the fact of the matter, we know how skillful and cunning our people are. And what we don't want to happen to is for the government to compromise what they see on these cameras. Because if it doesn't suit their agenda, they might decide to compromise and to, you know, yeah, to alter it, what is seen, because they have the technologies to do that. What if they want to get you? What if they want to get me? And they find a way to distort the images so that the image could look like you or could look like me. We've got to look at these things carefully. We've got to do our research on these cameras and the surveillance state that they are pushing us toward. And this is not only for Jamaica, this is also for the entire Caribbean and the entire world, because that is what they're doing. They're laying the foundation for eventually the mark of the beast, that no one will be able to buy or sell save he that has that mark. Now, the technologies are not the mark of the beast. Obviously, they lay the foundation for us to be watched continuously and to be surveilled. So you must understand that this is what they are setting up, and they are moving at a rapid pace, and you've got to get your act together. Okay, so thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Like the channel, like the video rather, and share the video here with as many people on the platform so that we can build this community and get in-depth conversation and ask the hard questions that very few people on this platform are asking. Thank you so much for joining, and see you in another one. Ciao.